Okay, they're predicting the Carolina Panthers record. So looking at the roster, offensive line is definitely a concerning spot, and Bryce Young obviously is a rookie. I'm not sure if he's set up for success since his best weapon in the passing game is Adam Thielen. I'm not sure how well Miles Sanders would do with a porous offensive line. Their defense, though, is looking really good with Derek Brown, Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson, J.C. Horn. They signed Von Bell, and they stuffed Jeremy Chin. Their defense, I think, is young and stacked. So their defense should be, I'm expecting at least a top 15 defense. And Frank Wright, not sure how I think he's a good head coach, but we'll see what he's got. So you have your first game versus the Falcons. Both these teams come in pretty inexperienced. Falcons have a pretty bad defense in general, but they have a great run game, and that run game is more like well worked last year. And Desmond Ritter, Bryce Young, um, both very young. This one's gonna be a good game, but I trust the Panthers defense over the Falcons run game, so I'm taking the Panthers. Then you have a game versus the Saints. Saints are a much more experienced team with a much better defense that should give Bryce Young his NFL welcome to the NFL moment, at least in my book. And I I think the Saints are just more experienced, so I'm giving to the Saints. And you have a game versus the Seahawks. Seahawks have such an explosive offense with Kenneth Walker, DK. I'm not sure how well Panthers defense will do, and I think the secondary will cause problems for Bryce Young, so I'm giving to the Seahawks here. Then you have a game versus the Vikings. Similarly, Vikings have a very good defense, and which the Panthers would I think do match up well against the Vikings, since Vikings is more pass oriented. But I think the Brian Flores led D, even though Minnesota have not great defense, I think Brian Flores led D will cause too much problems for Bryce Young and that offensive line. So I'm taking the um, Vikings here. Then you have them versus the Lions. Lions, another team with a very explosive offense, and their defense is slightly improved. This one's gonna be, I think, a close game, but I'm taking the Lions more experience, and I'm gonna take Goff over Bryce Young over any day. Then you have Denver versus Dolphins. Dolphins, similar to the Browns, they have a great defense that should challenge that Panthers offense, and they have a good defense led by a very experienced defensive coordinator in Big Fangio. So I'm gonna take the Dolphins here. And you have a bye, then you have them versus Bryce Young and the CJ Stroud. Both teams very young, very inexperienced, brought in a ton of new pieces, but the Panthers did better last year. I think their defense is definitely better than the Texans, so I'm taking the Panthers here. Then you have a game against the Colts. I think the Colts do have some good pieces, but I think their head coach is gonna hold them back big time, so I'm taking the Panthers. Okay, then you have a Thursday nighter versus the Bears, this is the Thursday night. It's a short week. Bears have huge home field advantage, and I think Bears have a good offense with Justin Fields, and might be hard to contain his legs. But I don't think the Bears defense is all that. But I think Bears home field advantage Thursday night will be too much. Maybe cold in November, but I'm still giving it to the Bears. Then you have a game versus Dallas. I think Dallas is just way more talented than the Panthers, way more experienced. So I'm giving it to the Cowboys. Then you have them to week 12 versus the Titans. Titans have home field advantage. I think Derrick Henry will have a good game versus the Panthers defense, which wasn't exactly great against the run last year. Um, and I think the Titans defense and Mike Vrabel being head coach would be good enough to contain Bryce Young and the Panthers offense. So I'm taking the Titans. And then you have week 13 versus the Buccaneers. Similarly, Bucks have another team with a very good defense, and the offense isn't the greatest, and the Panthers weren't that close to sweeping them last year, but I have the Bucks winning this. Then you have a Week 14 versus the Saints. I don't see the Saints being good enough to sweep the Panthers. I think at this point, the Panthers should be good enough to figure out the Saints defense, which I don't think is all that good. And the Saints offense, I think, will struggle against the Panthers defense. I'm giving the Panthers here. Then you have them versus the Falcons. I think the Falcons is too run game reliant, and I think the Panthers defense should be able to shut them down, and their defense isn't good enough. And I do think the Panthers will sweep the Falcons. In Week 16 versus the Packers, Packers I think is Jordan Love. I think Panthers defense will be able to get to Jordan Love, and the Panthers defense is good, but I think this one's a defensive game, and I trust the Panthers offense more than I trust the Packers offense, so I'm giving the Panthers here. Then you have a game versus the Jaguars, and Jaguars way more experienced. Secondary should cause problems for not great Panthers wide receivers, and I think Jaguars offense is just too good. I'm gonna give it to the Jaguars here. And then week 18 versus the Bucks, I don't think the Bucks are good enough to sweep the Panthers, so I have the Panthers splitting with the Bucks and take the Panthers here. So ending up the Panthers going 7-10, 4-2 in the division, 5-3 at home, and 2-7 away.